Well, small and medium enterprises will be watching the budget speech quite closely tomorrow, and they'll be hoping for some relief from power cuts. Businesses will also want to hear more on the bounce-back loan scheme announced by the President during the State of the Nation address. But here to discuss this even further is FNB Cash Investments CEO, Mr. Vaughan David. Vaughan, thank you so much for your time, and good morning to you. I can imagine the amount of relief needed right now by SMEs. I mean, we can talk about blackouts, load shedding. We're at stage 6 indefinitely now, but also the heavy floods. I previously, spoke to an SME owner out in Coffee Bay saying they can't operate because obviously, the flooding there has affected lives and livelihoods. But let's talk about the challenges that you have at your disposal in terms of data that SMEs rather have to endure.
Jamila, thanks for having me on the show. The view that we get is quite a clear view because, obviously we've got access to thousands of SME businesses. And we try, often in the conversations with our clients, we just try to get a sense as to how they're dealing with the crisis and what it is that they're specifically trying to do to make sure that they manage their cash flow. Like you understand, any business, cash flow is the most important thing, probably more important than profitability, and to manage cash flow in this time and make sure that they're able to operate during the blackouts is critical. So I think SME businesses will be aware and should be aware of what's happening on the budget speech, just in terms of what relief they should get and possibly could get from some of the blackouts, and perhaps what we're hoping for is some tax incentives for SME businesses in terms of electricity generation.
Yeah, and I fully support how you also encourage SMEs to pay close attention to the budget speech and just understand exactly how that impacts their businesses. But one particular point that I'm almost certain, Vaughan, that SMEs will be paying close attention to is the bounce back loan scheme, because it is the funding, the resources that are needed at this time. But it seems the details around this bounce back loan scheme are still a bit sketchy, at least from what the President told us from SONA.
We're hoping to see that they extend the bounce back scheme. It was introduced in 2020 during the COVID period to provide funding to small businesses at a much lower cost or much lower rate. And that should be coming to an end soon. So what we're hoping for is an announcement that they will be extending the bounce back scheme, because effectively what we're looking for is the ability for SMEs to be able to fund the purchase of electricity generation, either in the form of a generator for themselves, for the business, or in terms of a solar installation. And there's multiple solar options that we see our small businesses taking up. So, they can either buy it outright and, spend that large capital expenditure to get the solar systems up and running. But there are options where they can rent it or do power purchase agreements. And typically, a lot of the interesting facts that we're starting to see is how the SME businesses are taking these up.
Yeah.
If their cash flow doesn't allow them to spend that initial upfront capital, they have the opportunity to go a rental route or a power purchase agreement, which just means that they're going to be replacing their monthly electricity spend now with a solar provider, as an example. So I think all of these components are important for these business owners to understand how they can continue. They need to make sure that their businesses are able to continue during the blackout periods. And I think that the solar options are a boon going forward.
In your experience, obviously working with SMEs coming for loan applications for some sort of financial assistance or intervention from a bank perspective, I mean, how has your engagement been like? What exactly is top priority or most common from SMEs in terms of the assistance they also needed from banks?
As I mentioned earlier, I think a large portion of our client base are very focused on making sure that they're able to manage their cash flow in a decent manner. Now, you can be profitable and make a profit at the end of every month, but you can go out of business if you don't manage that cash flow properly. So the cash flow component is super important, and more we're seeing our clients manage their cash flow in such a way that allows them to know exactly how much money they have at the end of every month, to be able to then spend it on the new suppliers or buying new suppliers and and spending on the salaries, for example, for their staff. So this is an important piece, and having access to liquidity in the form of savings that you've generated and saved up over a period of 2 to 3 months to be able to tide you over the bad times, or having access to a loan that allows you to be able to access that money to get you through a period where you're waiting for payments. This is something that we find is becoming more and more prevalent, especially in our SME space. The larger corporates are typically quite good at this. It's the SMEs that are now learning and are dealing with this quite well going forward.
Yeah, understandably so. And I suppose my last question leads me to this. I mean, how important would it be for SMEs to expect some sort of relief or feedback from the finance minister regarding, one, economic growth, and two, infrastructure development? I mean, when we had a pothole focus yesterday, motorists were absolutely frustrated over and above the defective traffic lights, the potholes they have to endure, having to spend more on their tyres. You can imagine buses and taxis that operate with logistics on the roads equally frustrated. How important are investments in this regard for both economic growth and infrastructure?
I think it's critically important to any form of economic growth. If the finance minister makes announcements around actual delivery of infrastructure spend, any infrastructure spend of that nature and that size is going to have a trickle-down effect and a waterfall effect to the smaller businesses in the country. So it is going to have an impact on GDP growth. It will have an impact on the much larger businesses that will get access to some of the big contracts for infrastructure. But that will naturally have an impact on all construction firms, transport companies, manufacturers, etc., across the country. So I think from our perspective, any spend on infrastructure and commitment to infrastructure spend will be a much something that SMEs will be able to take advantage of.
Well, I appreciate you speaking to me about this, Vaughan. Thank you so much for adding your voice as we're anticipating what the minister will have to say tomorrow. Vaughan David, CEO of FNB Cash Investments, thank you for joining us right here on the SA Morning.